You can pull over there if you want.
Yep. Okay.
All right. But I've got this one. So. Okay. It is 7 o'clock, and I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. This is the regular meeting of the Kaneland School Board, and we will start with the pledge. We've got 2 flags for your convenience.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And we would like to inform everyone in attendance at the board meeting that this meeting is being live streamed, and it will be archived for access at any time by our community members on the internet within 24 to 48 hours of the meeting's conclusion. And we'll have a roll call, please.
Mrs. Witt.
Here.
Mr. Carey.
Here.
Mr. Lawler.
Here.
Mr. LePayton.
Here.
Mrs. Pavlak.
Here.
Mr. Rivas.
Here.
Mrs. Barber.
Here. With 7 members present, we do have a quorum tonight. Are there any items that board members would like to move from the consent agenda to the regular agenda tonight? Anything? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on. We're looking for approval of the agenda tonight as presented.
Yes.
So moved. Second. And a roll call, please.
Mr. Carey.
Aye.
Mr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mr. LePayton.
Aye.
Mrs. Pavlak.
Aye.
Mr. Rivas.
Aye.
Mrs. Barber.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt.
Aye. Motion carries 7-0. We'll move on now to our board and superintendent salutes, and we do have a salute tonight, so I'll pass it on to Dr. Layton.
Yes, and I will also then pass it on to Jill Maris, who's here representing the high school and a new group that we have, and she's also here with Carrie Oslager, assistant principal, and Mrs. Kuntz, one of our guidance counselors, and they're going to kind of let us know what the group's doing. So thank you for coming.
Well, good evening, and thank you for having us here. Wanted to come and share with you some excitement about a new group, old concept, new group that has started back up at Kaneland High School, and that is our student advisory group. It's a concept that we have valued for a long time. Just logistically, we're struggling to try and figure out how to make it happen. When we switched to the 8-period day and kids had their lunch periods at all different times, we didn't want them to have to miss a class period in order to do this, and so it was hard to get everybody together at one time. Fortunately, we have found a group that's willing to come in and meet with us on our late start Thursdays and do it during that time. So I am going to pass the mic off to Carrie Oslager and Ann Kuntz to share some of the details.
So we did have some students that were planned for this evening, but one was hurt and he couldn't make it today, and the other was planning to come, and then he emailed me just a little bit ago and said he couldn't make it. So we're the stand-in for the students. And one of the things that we have done, or that they have done, is actually Mrs. Kuntz has been a huge facilitator on working to develop norms for the kids and how they talk and deal with each other. It's a group of students that were all volunteer. We got their information and kind of threw it out there. We had about 50 kids that were interested, and then we had about 25 that continued to be interested, and we've had about between 15 and 20 that continue to come. Sometimes we only have 5, sometimes we've got 20. They're very concerned about the culture of our school, not in a bad way, but really wanting to develop it and build it, wanting to actually see developing more aspects of kids treating each other well, actually being a good citizen, a lot of the core values that tie into what we have for Kaneland 2020. A couple of the things that they have done is that we did on the first day of semester, second semester, we did an alternative schedule where we ran similar to the first day of school. And so in the process of that, we kind of went through and did some things, and our student advisory wanted our kids to be able to do some things and actually have some information that went out. Sharing the core values we did every class period, and then also we had some presentations at the lunchtime rotations, which our kids were facilitators for. And our students of the advisory helped Mrs. Kuntz deal with the aspects that they were talking about, student services. They introduced the speakers that we had from suicide prevention. They actually walked around the building and worked with kids that were doing some of our surveys. So they've been very active in that. One of the other things that they did is yesterday, it was supposed to be Friday, and that's the other thing that snow day kind of threw some kids off too. One of the 8th grade teams went over to Meredith and did an escape room event. is what the escape room. And so part of that was having some of the students, high school students, talk to in small group settings, 8th graders. So we had 10 that were interested, 8 that could continue to still go, and by the time the snow day happened, we had 4 that made it today and understood. I mean, exams and things like that. And they came back today and they were just all smiles. I'm like, how'd it go? And they're like, it was awesome. The kids had questions, they wanted to know things, and one of the girls said to me, she's like, and they had very appropriate questions. So it was, they said it was a really fantastic opportunity to sit down face-to-face in really small groups and kind of talk to 8th graders and have 8th graders have their questions answered, but then also have them get a chance to see what it's like at the school. And it's been a really good group of kids.
Yeah, it really has.
And I want to hand it over to her just for a minute. She's been doing a lot of really awesome things with this group and really working on some of the facilitation things. Can you share a little bit of what you've been doing?
I certainly can.
Please, because it's awesome.
So I'll share very little. If you have questions, I'll answer them. But I'm just going to say that nothing that I'm doing is any different than any other school counselor would do. We're all trained in group facilitation, and so I've used the counseling skills that I have in group facilitation and applied them to this model. And it's been really powerful because it's really about student voice and making sure that our students are able to dialogue through difference and all be heard, and sometimes walk away with ambiguity and no solid answers, but a sense of agency and hope, which is kind of what a public education is supposed to be all about.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah. And one of the really powerful pieces has been the administrative piece, because a school counselor could do this, any year they wanted, with pulling together a diverse group of students, but having it really validated because our admin stepped up and they have been present at every one. Sometimes our dean joins us. Mrs. Maris joined us for one that was really powerful. Even Mr. Adkins joined for one. So the kids really, I think it's going to have a big ripple effect, even if nothing specific. It's not a work group or a task group. It's really just a youth advisory board.
Right.
So thanks for the salute.
Sounds great. Sorry they couldn't make it, but I'll tell them you said hi.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Also, Dr. Fuchs wanted to recognize a group also.
Okay.
Yes, I just wanted to say thank you to all of our operations and maintenance people and transportation people. This last week has been a little extra challenging with all of our inclement weather. And so kudos and shout out to all of those folks for working at usually early hours for our transportation people and late hours for our maintenance people and so on and so forth. So shout out to them. Thank you.
Are there other salutes from board members? Anything? Okay, we'll move forward then. The next item, this is actually the first opportunity for public comment. We have 2 opportunities at board meetings for public comments, and we use the public comment to inform our decision making and to gain information and insight into what is happening throughout the district. Board meetings are held to conduct the business of the Board of Education and are required by law to take place in public. However, they are not public forums. The board does not enter into debate or respond to questions during this time. If you choose to speak publicly, we do ask that you stand, state your name and your village of residence or your association with us for the record, and limit your comments to 3 minutes or less so that all who wish to speak may have that opportunity. And we do ask that you remain civil and maintain a sense of decorum during this time. So that being said, the floor is now open for public comment. Are there any public comments tonight? Okay, hearing none, I'll close the floor to public comment, and we'll move on with the consent agenda. Tonight's consent agenda contains the following action items: the approval of the treasurer's report from January 2018, the approval of minutes of the January 29th, 2018 regular meeting, the approval of resignations and employment of staff, the approval of destruction of audio recordings from executive sessions from July 2016, the approval of the disposal and trade-in of a KHS driver's education card, and the following informational items: the professional development update and the Freedom of Information Act for FOIA requests report. So tonight, we're looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Second.
And a roll call, please.
Mr. Lawler,
Aye.
Mr. LePayton,
Aye.
Mrs. Pavlak,
Aye.
Mr. Rivas,
Aye.
Mrs. Barber,
Aye.
Mrs. Witt,
Aye.
Mr. Carey.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. Move on now to new business. The first item of new business, J1, is the approval to seek bids for spring of 2018.
Yes, each spring, when we come to seek the bids, they're based on the year. Sometimes there are more, sometimes there's fewer, some that are 1 or 2 or 3 years. And so, as you saw in the memo, there's a number that Dr. Fuchs will highlight and outline, and we can have more of that conversation.
Thank you, Dr. Layden. This year, we have quite a few bids that are contracts that are up for renewal. Typical copy paper. We will limit colored paper, as the board has typically directed us at this point. While we're still cutting lots of budget money, we will limit our colored copy paper to only what is absolutely necessary. Snow removal, we had a 1-year contract. We are considering going back to a 3-year contract. We'll decide once we get the pricing for that. But the structure of the contract itself we're planning to keep it the same. Fuel, 1 year at a time, so you're going to see that one every year, at least for a little while. Athletic training, we might move that one up in a recommendation for a 3-year. We'll get pricing for both 1 year and 3 year and see what the differences are. Fire inspection, that one is typically a 3-year contract. We haven't had any problems with a 3-year. Special ed transportation, we'll get pricing for both 1 year and 3 year on that. That one's a hard one. There are limited vendors in the industry to provide it, but yet we want the best service for our kids, and to get it at the best price, we just need to make sure that the company that is selected can fulfill their obligation. So we'll take a look at that one. Garbage and disposal and recycling, that again, there's quite a few vendors there, so a 3-year contract has not been a problem. We've switched between a couple of them, and 3 years at a time is generally doable. The nice thing about that is when we do switch companies, we have to take every garbage can or recycling bin out of every classroom, so it's time consuming, but it's once every 3 years, so we'll go for 3 years most likely on that. Cafeteria food, milk, and bread. We use a couple vendors there. We tend to get prices every couple years through a public bid. I talked with the food service director this morning, and she'll continue with what we're currently doing. Custodial paper supplies on the backside. We still belong to the cooperative at no cost to the district. They do the bidding on our behalf, so we know that we're getting good pricing there. Copier services, we are entering next year, this year is year 4. Next year will be year 5 of our lease with Kaneland, and so I assume that we'll be hearing from them at some point, but we'll have to see about pricing and competition. Security services, we are in year 2 right now. That contract will expire at the end of next year, so you could expect to see a bid then. So once the board approves us to seek these bids, we will go ahead and follow the law, which requires an advertisement in the newspaper, bid specification distribution, a wait period, a public bid opening, and then a public board approval. So at tonight's meeting, you're not approving the expenditure of any money. You're approving the administration to move forward to seek the bids. Each one of the bids listed on the front side of the paper will come back with its own recommendation. And based on the timing and the calendar and the spring break board meeting, only having one in March, I anticipate you seeing all of these, or at least most of them, that first board meeting in April. So would be what I'm anticipating. I don't think we can hit the March board meeting with all of the deadlines and things like that. So, are there any questions?
Are any in the front list, cooperative, and the cooperative?
No, the front list, numbers 1 through 7 are ones that are required to go to bid.
Okay.
Paper, the copier paper has to go to bid, it can't go through the co-op?
You know, I can check on that, Ryan. I don't know. We've never done it through the co-op. I can check with Mark and see if they have it. I haven't heard that they do. They do more the industrial things, but
Okay.
I can check and let you know. Yeah. We usually have for copier paper between 5 and 7 companies that bid on it each year. So I feel like we get good pricing.
Well,
Yeah.
I was just wondering if maybe
It'd be easier if we could get it through the co-op.
or maybe they have more buying power to get a better number.
Yeah, maybe. I'll check. Absolutely. Are there any other questions?
On the garbage, do we do a contract direct with them? And in this case, Waste Management?
Yes,
So it's direct with them, we don't do it through the city per se?
correct, because we do it for the whole district, and so we do it with Waste Management, the contract. And the bid specifications that we specify, those become the contract. They have to follow the rules in the bid specs.
Sure. All right, thank you.
For snow removal, are you doing a fixed price or a per push kind of bid?
You know what, last year when we did it, we added what you had asked, that fixed price for the whole season. They came up pretty high. I'll be curious, now that we've had lots of snow in the last week, how that would have worked.
Okay.
It's a great question. I'll probably get pricing for both and then make a recommendation based on that.
And then fuel is going to be plus or minus?
Yes,
Okay.
Opus.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, if not, we're looking for a motion that the Board of Education directs the administration to procure the items above by seeking public bids or by renewing contracts as described.
So moved.
Second.
Any further questions or comments? For the vote? Okay, we'll have a roll call, please.
Mr. LePayton.
Aye.
Mrs. Pavlak.
Aye.
Mr. Rivas.
Aye.
Mrs. Barber.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt.
Aye.
Mr. Carey.
Aye.
And Mr. Lawler.
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. Okay, we'll move on now to item J2, which is the approval of the school bus purchase for 2018-2019.
Dr. Fuchs, I'll let you go ahead and, without an introduction, go ahead and start sharing the information.
Thank you. As we move forward with the planning for next year, it's time to secure our school buses. As you know, we have a fleet of 58 71 passenger buses. We've got 2 activity buses and 3 21 passenger buses. And so in order to keep the fleet current, we try to replace buses, a few buses each year. Last year, we were fortunate that we were able to replace 7 buses, plus we added 1 to the fleet for special needs. This year, we are, as you know, as a part of our reduction plan, transportation was one area in which we were looking to save some money. If you look at page 2, you can see the chart. Based on the pricing that I've been given, which is the pricing for our buses, if we, again, purchase 1-year-old buses, which has worked out really well for us, we will save from last year's bus purchase $229,885, which leaves us just a little over $1.2 million to continue to try to reduce our planned expenditures. So our recommendation this year is to purchase 5 1-year-old buses. With a fleet the size of ours, the ideal purchase each year with replacement would be between 6 and 7 buses, and that would mean you'd keep them about 10 years. I've also provided for you the updated fleet with the mileage, and it's sorted by miles. So our bus with the most miles has 187,000. The 1-year-old buses come with mileage usually around 15,000. We've had them as low as 5 or 6. but the most it would come with would be $20,000. And then on the last page, I've provided for you the 5 buses that we want to trade. And so we've got all of that information for you. The trades would come in at $44,500. And so when it's all said and done then, I'm asking for an expenditure for 5 one-year-old replacement buses of $397,045 minus the trade at $44,500 for a total cost of $352,545 to be delivered after July 1 and paid after July 1.
How many buses do you have out for pickup and drop off? Like, not, I know it gets crazy with sports and all those, but just for your pickup and delivery to the buildings morning and afternoon?
On a given day, you mean like in the most?
Well, like
you would have about 51 when they're all out.
Right. Which I know sometimes it goes higher because then you have taken them to a basketball game and this and that.
Exactly. Afternoons are tough because of those sports. And then also, if you have any in the shop, then those are out of service as well.
Okay.
So you do have to have some spares.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So.
And how many spares do we typically try to?
We're right now somewhere between 6 and 8. It just depends. Right now, we're closer to the 6 because we have 2 at the shop getting warranty work done. But then when they come back, depending on how many are in service and things like that. So somewhere between 6 and 8, 5 and 8. 8 would be the most, and that's not on a normal day.
What criteria do we use to determine what buses are on the list, per se, to trade in?
Yep.
In this case?
Mileage is one, age is another, and now that we have a head mechanic, he's done a real nice job targeting buses that are costing too much money for repairs, and so that's why you see the buses on the list that you see.
Okay. And I think do we do the inspection on them? Do we have inspections done on them besides just us?
All of our buses must be inspected by the state in order to be road ready. So
is that once a year?
I believe it's 6 months.
6 months. Okay. And on the mileage, just like cars. Cars now you can have, actually right now we're comparing our mileage on our vehicles, which were over 200. But because we're taking care of them.
Right.
So does that apply to buses? It does? Because over the last 5 years I've been here, it's generally around that mileage area.
Yep.
And I was just wondering has that crept up over time, or is it just still the same?
I would say it's either the same or a little bit better because we've been keeping on pace with our fleet turnover. So, but anytime you get past 180,000 miles, that's when they start to generally cost more in repairs, and that's when you want to start looking at replacing them, just like you would a vehicle.
Correct.
Yep. 150, 160. Every 10,000 you put on after 150, you just got to keep a good close eye on it. These are buses that, go a long way every day with kids on them.
What's the average yearly mileage on the buses that we put out?
It's over 1 million for all of our buses.
I mean, per bus.
Per bus?
Is there an average?
Yes, there is. Usually we put, what was that? Yes. Say it again.
About 20,000?
It's at the bottom of page 1,
Yeah,
17,000.
Kaneland averages approximately 17,000. Thank you. I knew I had looked that up, but thank you for reminding me.
Dr. Fuchs, the trade-in values, are we breaking even or close to breaking even when we trade these in? So are we under, or are we, I trade my car and I want to make sure I recoup the money that I put into it. Are we doing that?
To maintain it?
To get rid of it.
I don't understand.
I don't either.
Okay.
Thank you, I'm
I
sorry.
buy a car for 20 grand. I traded in for 10. I just lost 10 grand on that, right? So, like, are we doing that, or are we? Is the math working in our favor?
Still don't get it.
Do we negotiate
Sorry.
that trade-in?
I don't,
Well, so
Do we negotiate
say
the
you,
trade-in?
say
is
you
what
do a
you're
bad
saying?
job buying a car in the first round, you
Okay.
overpay for it, right? And then you go in and trade it in, and they underbid it, or they undersell it, or whatever. Now I'm,
Oh, like you're upside down on.
Yeah,
your-
I'm upside
your
down.
oh,
contract.
okay.
Okay. We pay, when you approve and we buy it, we pay cash.
okay,
So we write a check for the buses.
Right.
So there are no interest costs.
okay,
And the value of the bus, at this point, because we're buying one-year-old buses, when you drive a new car or a new bus off the lot, you lose some of that
Right.
instantly.
right,
We are fortunate that we don't do that, so I
Okay.
feel good about that. In terms of the trade-in values, I feel they're fair based on the fact that one of them is, a 2006,
sure,
so it's 12 years old, with 185,000 miles,
right.
and there's still value in it.
So there's still value, but I guess the other part of that would be how much would we put into that bus to keep it going? Right, so that's what I was kind of getting at. too.
Beginning last year, was it last year when we got
Yeah.
the head mechanic? Yep, last year, we started tracking per bus.
Okay,
And so I don't have that specific data yet.
Okay.
But we will have as it moves forward,
okay,
per bus.
so, okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
So do we, when you talk about having spares, so do we, like you said 6 or 8? Are those the same 6 or 8, like all year, like the spares sit there?
It depends on what goes down. They get rotated and used, and then
But some
The
of the
next-
oldest ones
right, the
maybe
next
are a
one-
spare and
that's
not a
correct.
regular.
that's correct. So, for example, when we get these ones traded that are going, the next 5 or 6 that are next in line to go, they'll become the spares,
Okay.
and they're rotated.
Okay.
For example, if you got a bus that's giving you a lot of trouble, we don't send it to Morris. We send it maybe to like Blackberry Creek for a quick run.
Right.
Maybe to Elburn, to Lions Park area for a quick run. We don't send it out on the road far. Because then our mechanics just have to go chase it down when something happens. So
And
they're very good about rotating and planning those spares.
And just to clarify that older buses, it's not unsafe because every 6 months they have to be deemed
Ins-
roadworthy by the state. So it's more of what could happen would be more of a delay or a cost as opposed to
Safety.
a safety issue.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
You bet.
maybe it's a silly question, but why the white roofs?
Yeah. It's not necessary any longer. It was a preference of a previous director, and we're not paying for that $900, by the way.
Oh.
If you add up the prices, I didn't add it. What I did is I took the unit price times 5, and I did pick one, or I do want one equipped with the first 6 rows to have the built-in CRS seats.
Okay.
For early childhood, but I didn't buy any white roofs this time.
I didn't
It's just an
too.
extra cost. The way it was explained to me is if you live in a warmer climate, it can help keep them a hair cooler because there's no air conditioning. But in our climate, we don't get
It's not a big concern?
exactly. And it was
Maybe we
a
should paint
preference
the
of
roofs
a.
black
Yeah,
for heat, to absorb more heat.
that's right. So that on most days would be helpful. So, but it was definitely a preference of a previous administrator, so, which is fine.
So when deciding how many buses to purchase, and considering the budget cuts and everything, what exactly is the decision process? And I understand how we get to, which buses to trade in and things like that. I guess I'm wondering, you say there's somewhere between 6 and 7 is what's recommended. Do we then pare that down based on a cost number, or do we actually say, our bus fleet, although it's aging, it's doing well, and so we think that we can get by with 5 buses? I know you see what I'm getting at here. I'd like to know that it's based on need and not based on an industry standard or a recommendation, by a transportation authority somewhere, that we actually need 5 buses. And not just, we're going to buy them because it's recommended to buy 6 or 7, and so we pared it down a bit. If we could pare it down more, would we?
Great question. It is a strong recommendation not to pare it down anymore, because we've done that before. And what happens is then you have to have a year where you have to catch up. What we want to get to is a place where we can sustain. And while we're still in budget cutting mode, we do want the 7, because that is what would help us to keep a fleet turnover every 10 years, a bus, between 6 and 7 buses. So then we knew how much we needed to save from the budget, the whole 1.5 million, and again, wanting to take a little bit from everywhere, but not a lot from one place, so that we don't find ourselves wishing we would have done something different by purchasing 0 and then trying to make up for it in the future, because then in the future, you're still going to have curriculum needs, you're still going to have tech needs, staffing, etc. So it's a part of a full strategy to reduce our budget while still trying to maintain, to the best of our ability, the system. So it was a system-wide conversation of how do we get a little from everywhere to right, I believe the words are right-size the system. So.
And if I guess this is a question for Dr. Layden, I guess we don't know yet to what extent the budget cuts are going to reach students, but you are confident that by purchasing 5 buses, the recommendation to buy 5 buses, that money, there isn't some place that money would be better spent, like if we only did 3 buses instead of 5 or something like that. There's not such a painful cut that's going to touch students so much that, I guess it's hard for me to make a decision not knowing what else is coming down the pike.
Yes, I would say, based on the conversation that we've had internally, cabinet and ad team, with the number of reductions that we do have to make and the totals, we are comfortable with 5 to be able to make the purchase of 5 to maintain the fleet and yet not have the cuts dramatically impact any one area for next school year.
Okay. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Other questions from other board members? Give another little bit.
I'm sort of on the same place you are as far as, because I have been one of the ones who's advocated for continuing to reduce the number, to do the minimum replacement that's essential for the health of the fleet of vehicles. And, $78,000 per bus, 4 buses, would that $78,000 make a material difference in some other place where as you're trying to balance all those cuts? And I know we've, for the 2nd year in a row, asked you to do some very difficult trade-offs. But I guess just reassure me that $78,000 for the 5th bus is not going to come out of something that's programmatic that'll directly impact the kids. And it's exactly what Teresa said. We don't know what other choices you're making right now as you prepare through this process, and we don't know what you will present to us. And I understand the time issue that we do need to place the orders and order these things now. It's not like we can wait until we have perfect information and complete information on this. So just reassure me, please.
Peter be reassured that this is one that will not have a material impact on the entire school district.
I think getting to a
Yeah,
place of
that's-
flat would make me happy, and I don't know if
Yeah.
flat's 4 or 5, or 6 or 7, or what that number is. But if it's 4 this year and 6 next year, that 150 we've got to find next year is tough. And I feel like we're a little bit there on the capital expenditures that we talked about last time, that we might be pushing a little of those in the futures, like the parking lots and some of the big dollars that we keep getting another year off of. So if you can get another year off your buses, why replace them? I mean, the same argument, but 5 at least doesn't seem to be pushing the problem forward, but we maybe could get by with 4. Yeah, it's a lot of money.
Jillian, can you share a little bit about, today you did some research on the repair expense on the buses. Is that something that, as we move forward, we sent that chart out with the 5-year list, 4-year listing, I believe. Is that something where, over the years, you've seen any trends to where the buses are either getting newer or there's more of them, that there's fewer costs so that in some year we could get that extra or save that extra bus somewhere?
I believe that we're seeing a trend, but it is still fluctuating. For example, in 2012-13, we were almost $138,000 in repairs. Then we had a good year, a couple good years, $85,000, $95,000. In 15-16, it jumped up to $107,000. But then last year, we had an excellent year at $62,000. So overall, it's come down, but we had the 1 year that it jumped back up. So yes, I believe that the repairs are starting to slow down because we're starting to catch back up with our fleet. And I truly believe having a head mechanic is making a difference as well.
That was my next question.
Yep.
It seems like we had such a good year this year, perhaps
Yeah,
that might be the...
exactly. I'm curious. It's always intriguing. You got to wait till the end to see where the invoices come in and things like that. But last year definitely was a good year, at 62 too. So, but
I do my math right. In the last 5 years, we've replaced just over half the fleet, 32 buses.
Mm-hmm.
How many years did we go before that? Wasn't there a spell of years that we bought?
We did 1 and 2 buses for a few years before that. You can see in 12-13 it was only 1.
Okay.
Right before that, I'd have to go back and look, Ryan.
Yeah, I'm not trying to
But
hold you to anything.
yeah.
I'm just.
But
I feel like 2008, 2009, we might have bought 0.
Exactly,
In
yeah.
those years where we had hard freezes on
Staff and
salaries
everything.
things like staffing.
Yeah. So what if you think about it, 1 bus replacement out of a fleet of 60, that you're not going to be able to have any kind of flat purchasing from year to year. So.
I guess I could echo what the other people have said, or members have said. It's easy to cut buses but we're trading it for I don't know. And I would rather cut buses now than trade for I don't know later, so we have the extra 80,000 available, but
Remember,
I don't know.
it's not quite 80 because you got to take off that trade that you're not going to get that value. So call it 65.
Okay, I'm not.
Yeah. Just so that, and at that point you kind of go, well, okay.
Yeah.
How much is the new bus?
The new bus itself,
New,
86.5.
So not a year old, but like new.
86.6.
86.5 or 86.6.
Yeah,
So if we
86.6.
don't do it now, I think that's you lose the ability to get a 1-year-old bus. If we change our minds later, it's $20,000.
Oh, okay.
But
so
you get a
sure.
whole nother year out of the bus theoretically, so
Right.
that might.
It's balancing.
Yes.
Yeah, and I don't know
It
what
is.
that right balance is. I'm struggling with this one myself. That I guess I fall back to we'll have to trust the administration to lead us in that regard.
I know over the years we've talked about this whole issue an awful lot. Is given the fact that the fleet is getting younger with all those replacements that have been made in recent years, do you feel, even if 6 to 7 sort of might be the sweet spot for an annual replacement cycle. Would 5 per year going forward be something that would probably be sustainable, or do you think we'd need to come back with the fleet in another year or two and say, by only doing 5? I'm looking at the mileage on these and the ages on them. It looks like we're getting to a point where 5 might become more of the sustainable. And to Pedro's point about vehicles becoming more dependable and having a head mechanic who is doing good maintenance on these things, might we see that cycle time gets extended even, because the impact of a 1 or 2 year extension on that cycle time is significant for the district. So might 5 be a sustainable approach going forward?
Every 12 instead of 10?
12 years, you said?
Yeah, I was
No,
just,
that-
every
right.
11 to 12 years versus every 10 years.
And then you
is
add a
fine.
year because you're buying it used, so
Right.
that's 13.
But
It's sort of a
Couple with
rhetorical
declining-
question. I don't know
Yeah,
if
I was gonna say, I'm
I don't
not
know
sure
that
I have, I would hate to give you the wrong answer and say yes, and then come back and say, I wasn't quite so right.
we need 6
But
this
on the
year.
other hand, I hate to say no, because you might be right, or it might be. So it's certainly something to start to look and do some math and to ask those questions. And ask, what are others getting?
And does declining enrollment mean
Mhm.
less
Thinking that
less stops on a bus route or a shorter bus route, or do you still have to cover all the same ground because the kids all still live in the same areas?
Yeah. I would say a little bit, because we picked up some of those special needs routes, and now we've got a couple where we're traveling a little further than we were before. But you're not stopping. You're going there, you're getting the child, and you're coming back to a school. So there's pros and cons, give and take there. Not only that, but you're not paying a contractor to do that. So savings there as well. So, but we're tapped out right now with special ed in terms of expansion. So we need to just hang in there for a little bit. Maybe next year come back and get a couple more routes, but not for 18-19.
Additional questions? So the recommendation is for the purchase of 5 buses. We've been, discussing and balancing and trying to decide. So is there a motion that a board member would like to make for the purchase of a certain number of buses? Again, the recommendation is that the board directs the administration to move forward with the purchase of 5 one-year-old replacement school buses in the amount of $397,045.
Less the trade-in
Yeah.
value of.
Yeah, that was awkward, that's why I paused. Less the trade-in value of $44,500 for a total cost of $352,545 to be delivered after July 1st, 2018.
So moved.
Second.
Further comments, last
Todd?
questions?
Todd?
Yes.
For next year's the last year we're in the same conference, right?
Correct.
And I know they're trying to coordinate another conference. Do you have any forecast where we have to travel further? Or
A great question. The goal is to have a conference where there are more schools that are consolidated and closer. Peter and Jill are, Jill's president and Peter, president of the conference right now, are trying to do work with additional schools to see what might be available for 1920, but that is a goal to try to find closer schools, and that would also help. It's a good point.
But we have at least one more year where at least
Yes.
this would, at least all the questions are kind of relevant in a sense.
One more year with the current conference, yes.
And then we'll know that next year then.
Good question.
Yeah, because I remember when we went to the current conference, I did an analysis, because it was going to be much further, just to find out how much it was going to cost additional. I'll have to pull that back out just to see, because when we get the schools that are going to be in the new conference,
Do a
it will be
similar
interesting to
analysis.
see, if there will be any possible savings. Huh, I forgot about that.
Geneseo's a 2-hour drive.
Yeah, it is. We've been a lot better too about doubling up teams on sports buses and that, and taking 2 teams at a time and such.
So we do have a motion on the floor. It's been made and seconded. And if there are no further questions, we'll have a roll call, please.
Mrs. Pavlak?
Aye.
Mr. Rivas?
Aye.
Mrs. Sparber?
Aye.
Mrs. Witt?
Aye.
Mr. Carey?
Aye.
Mr. Lawler?
Aye.
Mr. LePayton?
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0. Thank you for the good discussion. I feel like we've really got some good information through our questions.
Thank you for the questions.
Move on to item J3, which is the discussion of the middle school course book on first reading.
Yes, Mr. Rice is here, the Director of Ed Services for 6 through 12. Annually, the discussion of the course handbook comes as first reading, and then questions, anything that needs to be answered prior to the next board meeting, then it generally comes back on consent at the next board meeting if there aren't any additional questions that need to be addressed. Mr. Rice.
Thank you. So as Dr. Layden said, this is really just an informative reading tonight. You won't vote on anything, and then as long as there aren't any questions that need to be answered or any objections, this will come forward again in our next board meeting as a part of the consent agenda. So if you remember about December, we brought forward the high school course book, so I tried to make this process look fairly similar. It's not quite as exciting. There aren't as many new courses coming on the middle school course book, and really the one that we'll talk about the most tonight you've actually already heard about because we talked about it when we brought forward the CTE revisions last year. So as a little teaser, that's Digital Graphics 1. But by way of review, the way the course revision or course adoption process at the middle school works is a little bit different than the high school. The high school has a curriculum committee that meets, and department members, faculty members can bring forward ideas for new courses, and they can talk those through, and it's an interdisciplinary group of people that doesn't tend to be needed as much at the middle school, although as Principal Faulkner and I have been talking about, there are more ideas coming forward for more new courses at the middle school. So we are trying to align those processes a little bit more, and that may be something that we look to form in the near future. But right now there's no plans for that because there's no need for one. Right now, most of the time you'll see a new course brought on at the middle school will happen through a curriculum review process like what happened with our CTE. This was the first year that we did a similar step as we do at the high school and send out the course book for review to the curricular areas so they have a chance to kind of just look things over and make sure things align. Most of what you'll see in this presentation and in the hard copy that you guys, I think Dr. Layden emailed it to you and I brought you a hard copy tonight as well, are really just revisions around language and to try to make sure that the course descriptions that students are reading are the most up to date and really reflect what's actually happening in the classroom. There's a lot of specificity included in some of those things. So, like I said, the one we'll talk most about tonight is that Digital Graphics 1 course. This course came about as kind of a joint effort between some of our Fox Valley high school and middle school instructors. Nikki Larson and John Purnell worked really closely together on creating this course. The idea is that a student that takes this course at the middle school could then go directly into a more advanced course, Digital Graphics 2, at the high school, as opposed to having to start in an Intro to Graphics class or Graphics 1. The idea behind that is to try to kind of streamline the pathways for students that maybe have an idea or know what they want to get into. So we're kind of piloting that structure here at the middle school this year. It's a balance that we have to strike because the middle school philosophy is about exposing kids to different things, letting them kind of try things out, and not forcing them into a pathway too soon before they have a chance to experience everything. But we do know there's students that have done some of that work and really are ready to take that next step and go on a little bit further. So we want to have some options for them as well, and that's where this course comes in. This course, we're going to be likely capping the enrollment to make sure that we can still fit within our FTE needs. I'm kind of claiming it's a new course. It's really not. It's really kind of a revision to an existing course that was digital art. Most of the electives at the middle school are quarter-long classes. This course will be offered as a semester, which is a bit of a departure. We're kind of that's why we want to look at capping the class, see the impact that it has on the enrollment in the other courses, see how students feel about it, see how teachers feel about it, and see if this is a model that we use moving forward. So it's really kind of a year of watching it and seeing how it benefits the kids. We're keeping this at the 8th grade level. The students start to get a little bit more mature and are starting to make some decisions about what might follow in high school. And then again, we'll revisit this at the end of the year and talk about kind of how that went. Any questions about that course before we move on to some of just the more general pieces? Yes, sir.
All right, so this would allow, if they take this course, they'll be able to go to high school and take digital graphics too?
Yes.
So the course description requirements and all that stuff is the same as whatever the high school class is?
It is and it isn't. So there's a difference in timing, obviously. So at the high school, it's like they have more minutes in the day, and they can teach more things. So Nikki Larson, who teaches the high school version, and John Purnell, who will do the middle school version, have kind of worked to condense it into just what are the absolute must-haves. What are some of the things that maybe you take some time to enrich on at the high school, or spend a little bit more time to get students to do some deeper exploration that you could do in a bit quicker way. It's really similar to how we do the Spanish at the middle school right now, where it's kind of pared back to really focus on the core must-haves, and some of the nice-to-haves to kind of explore some of the cultural pieces or something like that are maybe left off so that the students get the key knowledge they have to move on.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the digital graphics too, is that I'm sorry, refresh my mind, is that a new one? We have it already?
That's a Fox Valley course, so that one's been on the books for a while. So that's why it was kind of neat to see this play out, because we're not only seeing the high school and the middle school, we're also looking at Fox Valley. So, a traditional pathway would have been a student takes art at the middle school, and then they come up and take intro to graphics at the high school, and then Fox Valley Graphics 1, then Fox Valley Graphics 2, and in order to get all those courses in their schedule, there's a lot of manipulation that has to occur. So those ones that they know this is what they want to do, we want to see if there's a way to streamline that for them.
Okay, and obviously this will be fit into what the counselors use as their
exactly
path type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Mike, is there a path to AP from digital graphics?
There's not right now. So we kind of talked about this a little bit when we talked about valedictorian, salutatorian. There's an AP art course that's being offered for the first time. Next year at the high school, it's a bit of a different flavor than the digital graphics piece. They could overlap depending on what a student's project is, but when we talk about adding capstone pathway, like this graphics 2 course would be a capstone, but as we make it easier for students to get into that at an earlier age, we can talk about, so what would that next step be and what does that capstone look like? It may not be an AP course, but it's definitely like that real world, hands-on, career-oriented sort of thing that they'd be doing.
But you do have an AP Studio Art class right now?
It'll be due next year.
Due next year, and that's going to be traditional 2D then?
I believe. Well, I think it's going to be dependent on some of what the students sign up for, and more like a studio course.
Okay.
So again, the path would be from this course into the digital graphics 2 at Fox Valley Career Center, so they skip 2 classes, the intro and digital 1.
The intro courses we have at the high school they're kind of unique to Kaneland, and in an attempt to kind of help students do what we talked about at the middle school and kind of dabble in some things and see what they like before they're able to move on. You don't have to take intro to graphics to get into the Fox Valley courses. Most students do. So it's not a must-have, but a lot of our students end up, that's their first exposure to that kind of digital art world. So that's why it exists. It's still for those students that maybe didn't take it at the middle school, or they're not sure that's what they want to do, so they can still try it for a semester before they lock themselves into that full course at Fox Valley.
And is there a minimum performance standard, like when you do this, like you have to at least get a B in the class? Or?
Yeah, I tend to shy away from that prerequisite of just a letter grade because I don't believe it tells us enough about the student. So what I've asked Nikki and John to do is, as they're talking about this, what are those skills that a student must have? The way we tend to write these courses more often than not, now that I'm kind of more involved, is a typical student will have had success in, and then we list all those different things. And then a part of when the student meets with their counselor and when a teacher's involved is they consider the letter grade, of course, but it's, to me, and you'll hear me harp on this for years still, is it's more about what the student's actually learning, because the letter grade can tell an entirely different story sometimes.
So it's more personalized.
It's definitely more personalized, yes.
That's good. Okay, thanks.
And there's no cost to this, right?
No. There's the only costs that would be associated with this were already earmarked for the digital arts class, so it's just trading one for the other, and it's stuff that's already in the budget, so it's nothing new.
Okay. So no additional equipment or any, okay.
So this is going into the high school, not Fox Valley Center?
This course will go in the middle school and then lead into the Fox Valley Career Center.
So in the Fox Valley Career Center, we have coming from different schools, students. Is that going to flood the classes?
With Kaneland students?
Yeah.
It may. We have a lot of courses right now that are heavy on Kaneland students just because of our association with Fox Valley and how close we are, and it's easier for them to have transportation. So one of the things we'll kind of watch is what is the impact this has, and I think it's not with the intent of stealing it away from Fox Valley, but if this becomes an area where we have a lot of students that are interested in it, there's always the option of looking at, do we offer this right on Kaneland's campus and take it back for ourselves? We've done that with other programs in the past, and other schools do that as well. So that's probably a conversation that'll be a few years down the road, but it's one that if we get to that point, we would definitely consider.
So the other schools that are part of Fox Valley, do they already offer this type of a course in their middle school?
Likely not. I haven't done that research, but likely not, because of Nikki and John were pretty excited about this opportunity. And Nikki would know
Those students
that.
from those other districts would be taking the same kind of path that our students have been taking.
Mhm.
They would take an introductory course at their home school, and then they move into the digital too.
Or they would, or they would jump right into the Digital Graphics 1 and Fox Valley without kind of that intro feeler course.
Is there a grade level that the current Fox Valley class has that students can sign up for?
They typically tend to be juniors or seniors because of how their schedule works, but I don't know that, and the other part of that for other schools is the transportation piece. I don't know that it has to be that way. There's no law that says it has to be that way, but there's just how it tends to work out for kids as they work through the spectrum, and then by the time they get to that year, that's when they have the openings in their schedule, and they've taken the prerequisites and they know. So again, as we see students do this here, what impact will that have on when they register? Will they do it right away? Will they have it kind of in their back pocket so when they get to that junior year, they can jump right into that level two? We don't know exactly yet, which is why we're kind of taking the slow approach, only doing it with one course and seeing what does this look like. It's also unique to add the Fox Valley variable. Most of the time, we've got Spanish right now and algebra and some other courses that they feed right into Kaneland, so we have more control over that. This is really the first time we've looked at doing something like this that has that Fox Valley implication as well.
And where I'm going with that is would it be a concern that you have freshmen with juniors?
We already have that in a lot of our
You
courses.
have that already?
Yep. Mhm.
Okay. And would they, as coming in as a freshman, is that class going to be available to them or only juniors?
That's the thing we don't know yet. So that's what we haven't seen anybody request it up to this point right now. And you've probably helped more students than I have, but I can't think of any of our freshmen that have enrolled right into a Fox Valley course. Maybe there's one graphics class that we have that runs, I'm sorry, it's not a graphics class, it's like a health occupations class that runs on the Kaneland schedule. And we have some Project Lead the Way courses that run similar to a Kaneland schedule, and they may have gone that route before. I can pull those numbers, but I don't think we've ever had any go straight into the graphics program.
Mike, do we have licensing agreements for Creative Suite already?
That's what yeah.
So it's cost neutral?
Yes.
You're not increasing?
Right. Because again, I call it a new course because it really is in the way we're offering it, but it existed as digital arts at the middle school before.
So what's the class size for this kind of class?
It'll be roughly 30.
So you have that many licenses? Do you have enough, and you don't have in other computers or just that one lab?
Pardon me?
Do you have in other computers or just that one lab?
At the middle school, I think it'd probably be just that lab, and then I know we use it in yearbook and journalism at the high school, and then some of the other art classes that we have. But to separate the two, nobody has said that would be a competing interest. I believe we're set on that.
Okay.
So.
To add a follow-up on what Pedro brought up, if you had a limited number of spaces in that Fox Valley class, and we had a freshman or a sophomore because they'd taken the middle school class, and then there's a junior or senior, would they be bumped because
Right.
we're the upperclassmen?
We haven't had that problem yet. It'll be a good problem to have when we get there, and then we'll have to figure it out. But yeah.
So freshman and sophomore, it's not specific that they couldn't, it's a world where they could, but these classes that he's describing at Fox Valley are blocked for 2 of the 8 periods of the day. And so for a freshman to take a Fox Valley course, they would have to be an exceptionally driven student to want to dedicate 2 of their 8 periods of their freshman year to this course.
Okay, so then they're going to take this course in 8th grade and they're going to wait 2 years?
They could,
We
right?
actually have a second course, which is new as of next year, which is another 1-semester digital graphics course that's a Kaneland course, not a Fox Valley course. Or hopefully they would take more art classes outside of just the digital ones. So by moving this class to 8th grade, you're opening up space for them to take a richer, more broad scope of art and design classes besides just limiting their opportunities to just.
Well said. Thank you. Thanks for the assist.
And it's the type of information they would retain for a 2-year break?
It could be, it could not. So that's what, again, a lot of this is wait to be seen. And we have to kind of see how it goes.
Okay. Others?
The remaining ones on here, I'm not cutting anybody off.
No, carry on.
The remaining ones on here, I won't go through word by word, but I just put them in here for you to kind of look at to see an example of some of the types of kind of wording changes that happen as the groups review their curriculum. Math, for example, added just those words in green. They added them to the end of their course description because they wanted it to be a little bit more specific. As you work through some music, there was a course that no students have signed up for 2 years, so they pull it off, and they've kind of been pushing students more towards a performance-based approach anyway. And this was more of a survey course to just look at the types of things. So that course isn't being offered anymore. Social studies did a lot of work to revamp the language in their course descriptions to really focus on the instructional techniques they use and how it's more like personalized learning as opposed to kind of some of the more traditional things you might think of when you think of a social studies course. They talk about things like grit. They talk about things about learning spaces and learning environments. So you'll see that in your packet as well. And then the visual arts descriptions, besides just this digital art course, Suzanne Farr really did a nice job of trying to rewrite those to talk about types of projects that they do, places that they have to exhibit their work in the community, types of field trips that they might want to look at. So again, just as a student's trying to make this decision about courses to enroll in, giving them the most up-to-date and the most current kind of language that they possibly can. Typically, I wouldn't even, these sorts of revisions don't tend to get included in the high school presentation like this because they happen so often, but because there's not as much going on with the middle school course book, I wanted to include them for you so you could at least see them and get a little bit more of a glimpse into what the students will be seeing at the end of the month. So in summary, there's kind of that one newish course that's going to replace digital arts, which was a quarter course, will become a semester course, and then one deletion and quite a few changes to language on there. And so I'll see if there was any questions that you might have.
We have identified any potential changes to FTEs?
And because of this change? There wouldn't be any. So that was one of the things that, if you remember when we brought it forth last year as part of the CTE piece, one of the reasons why it didn't go into place this year is because Brian and I felt like we needed to spend a little bit more time looking at how do we keep it cost neutral. So we think we've got a plan to do that now by capping the enrollment a little bit and just making sure we watch the course, and so we won't let it create an FTE need.
Thank you for that.
I have one quasi, maybe it's not the right time to ask this question. Why don't you let eighth graders take the first Spanish class, Spanish 1? Why do they not have the flexibility to?
It's broken into two. So we did the very first year, and they did a kind of an accelerated course, and as they kind of implemented that.
I'm not asking the right question. You're answering something. I don't mean to cut you off.
No, it's fine. Go ahead. I don't want to answer the wrong questions.
Well, it's in your description. It says 7th grade is the equivalent of the first semester. 8th grade is the equivalent of the second. So if you let the 8th graders take the equivalent of the first semester, they'd at least have a foundation, kind of like what we're talking about. So that's what I don't understand why they don't.
So I've not ever thought of it from that realm. The kind of functional reason as to why is because they would re-enroll in that Spanish 1 that freshman year if that's when they were going to take it. So it would be kind of repeating that first semester. But I've not thought of it as giving them the opportunity to kind of do that primer level. And so that's definitely something worth the conversation. At the high school, we don't, without adding to FTE, I don't think we would have the capability to kind of support that, okay, you've already taken the first semester, so what do we do for the second? But it's something we could talk about. We haven't even explored that. So
okay.
It's a good question.
Did I hear you right? You have 7th and 8th grade, the 2, whatever. You start all over as a sophomore, freshman?
If you only took half of it like that. So if you take it both years, it counts as the full year, and you can go right into Spanish 2. But if you only took half of it, you'd only have half of the course, and the only place we'd have for them to go would be to start over, and so they'd be repeating something. But that might be good. If you took it, you'd have kind of a primer on it, so it still could be good for a student.
It just seems like you give them more flexibility because I know, speaking personally, because I have a daughter in 7th grade, it was a big debate whether she does Spanish or not because she could do this versus that. But if you let her at least get a taste of it in junior high, where it's not as important.
Right.
It just seems like the flexibility would be
I agree.
appreciated.
Brian and I have talked a lot about that, this is a bit of a digression, so tell me to be quiet and we can move on. But I think we don't have that true exploratory feel to world language at the middle school right now. It's you're all in or you're all out. And I think the solution would probably be to offer something at that 6th grade level of just a taste, but we don't, it hasn't kind of come to that level yet. And to see, do we want to do that? How do you fit that into an exploratory wheel that already exists? But to kind of talk about exactly if you don't know that you want to commit those full 2 years, how do you even get kind of just that exposure to the language? So we're talking about it, but I don't know that we've got the answer for it yet.
Well, at least you give them the option in this case to know that they got the taste of it, and know that they're going to have to start over.
True.
Or reiterating it when sometimes if you, like I say, if you do it the second time, you probably learn more.
That's true. That's totally true.
Or students that may take longer to get there with a new concept.
Yeah.
Especially that.
And I'll be honest, I've truly never thought of it that way, so I appreciate the question.
Thank you.
So your daughter's going to have an option next year?
I don't know.
See what we can do. Cool. Well, thank you. As I said, there's no vote. You don't have to do anything fancy for me right now, but barring any other sort of things you want me to look at, it'll come back to you at the next meeting. So thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rice.
And that will come back on consent.
Correct.
Yeah. All right.
Human resources.
To item J4, which is the presentation and update of the candidate profile for the strategic plan.
Yes, we transition to Mr. Atkins. Just as a reminder, Kaneland 2020 has 3 primary strands: personalized learning, culture, and the human resources piece. What Mr. Atkins is going to share tonight is the primary component, or one of the primary components of the HR piece, which is the candidate profile. Hang on, Mrs. Aversa, 1 second. We're about to introduce you in a second, so as part of, before you leave, wanted to have that introduction to the graduate, or the candidate profile that Mr. Atkins will share. And then also tonight in the employment of staff, as part of the consent, you approved our new elementary assistant principal. So I wanted Chris to be able to take a second to introduce you to our board, or reintroduce you, because last year got the new position as the dean.
My first time in front of the microphone. Thank you, good evening, and congratulations to Sam Aversa. Sam, if you could stand real quick. Many of you know Sam is our dean here at the high school, or middle school, sorry, and she has applied and been selected as the replacement assistant principal for next year at Blackberry Creek and John Stewart. So a little bit of a homecoming for her back to John Stewart, but I cannot tell you how excited both buildings are to have Sam join them. And I believe there's 2 students at Stewart who will be excited as well, because they may be able to get a ride to school now. So congratulations to Sam, and I think probably an exemplary example of retaining quality staff as she's matriculated from the teaching corps to the administrative corps, and now to even another layer of administration. So thank you to Sam, and congratulations.
Thank you, Sam. And still,
now
please
you can
leave.
go.
Still, please
Now you
leave. I
can
wasn't
go.
trying to.
No, everybody's going to go.
Thank you. It's not like
Move that over so your
Yeah.
head. Yeah, because that light was right in your face.
Right. So our Kaneland 2020 plan requires us to seek, retain, attract quality staff. And to that end, we started out on a journey earlier this year to find out from various stakeholders what are the attributes of those very quality staff. And so we wanted to have an opportunity for various groups around the district to provide input to a candidate profile. I think if you look at Kaneland 2020, you'll see this ingenious overlay of a graduate profile, of the candidate profile, and now our learner profile for our students. And those 3 things together create an opportunity to have a very robust program here at school where our staff supports our students achieve the outcomes that we hope for them, and thus the Kaneland 2020 vision is achieved. So as we went through this process, we talked about a variety of things with parent groups, CAC, student groups, the Youth Advisory Board. I have to compliment Mrs. Kuntz. The students that we met with at the high school were very introspective. They've raised a lot of good questions and gave us a lot of good insight. and we learned a variety of things as we met with everybody. We have some very, very articulate students and staff and parents. People know what they are seeking. When you ask them to describe a teacher, often they'll share stories of Kaneland staff that they experienced and had as teachers. They will also share what they are hoping for and wishing for and dreaming for with their students. So that's an exciting thing that we learned. We want the best staff possible. There's a shift to not only include the attributes of an individual person, but also what that person does for the learning environment. So there was definitely some feedback we got about the student learning. And then when we talked further, there was additional conversation about how are teachers crafting those personalized learning experiences for our students. And so we were able to take all those components into put a process together that kind of coalesced all those components. So what we did for our adults and for our youth advisory board students is we took 3 major influences on our work. The first being the core values from the Kaneland 2020 plan. The second being the Danielson framework and the various attributes that we actually use to evaluate educators. And then the third would be the personalized learning look-fors with personalized learning. So the very descriptors of what happens in the classroom. We describe those things to the participants, and then we ask them to do a prioritization activity. That prioritization activity resulted in, I think the board, you guys have this, a prioritization of the attributes. And so I gave a copy of this to you in your packet so that you could see what each group prioritized. But then what we did was we aggregated all that information into an average, and that average is what then helped us with the candidate profile. So our staff, we talked with TAC, we talked with the AAC OC groups, and you can see what they prioritized. Planning and prep, ownership of learning. I think you'll see similarities, maybe different specific priorities, but the attributes pretty much overlap. We talked to the CAC, the Youth Advisory Board, that also had some National Honor Students, Society students with them, and you could see what they prioritized. And then we took all of those and we put them together, and this is what we came up with. Instructional delivery was the #1 priority. How are our teachers delivering the learning experience to our students? Purposeful learning. We don't want to have our students' time wasted. We want it to be fruitful. We want it to be rigorous. We want it to be relevant. So purposeful learning. The classroom environment. We kind of learned and heard that kids don't want to learn from people they don't like, ironically enough. And fortunately here, we don't have that, if at all, which is a great blessing to have in this district. But the classroom environment is key to learning. If students don't feel safe, if those hierarchy of needs aren't met, if they don't feel respected, it's going to make for a challenging learning environment. We want our kids to have an ownership of learning. We don't want them to do it because my teacher said so. We want them to do it because, hey, that's interesting. And I think you heard that. I heard that anyway in the description of the digital class at the middle school level. We have some students who are interested in that media, in that artistic opportunity, and so we want to provide it. Why? Because they want it, not because they are being told to. Planning and preparation. I've said this before. I think some of you may have heard me say this. Teaching is rocket science. It is very difficult work. It is challenging, and the planning and preparation that goes into that is immense. The layering, the design, the artistry that's involved in teaching is huge, and so we want candidates that can do that as well. We want a commitment to excellence. It's an educational institution. We don't deal in widgets. We don't deal in doohickeys. We deal in students. We want it to be the best opportunity that we can. We want to make sure that students have an independence for learning that's fostered, that's developed, that's strategically taught over time. We want to make sure that our staff have integrity. They do what's right for kids. I tell people all the time, do what's right for kids. If that means throwing me or my colleague under the bus, do it because that's what's best for kids. So have that integrity. We want them to take their professional responsibilities seriously, and we want them to make sure that during the learning process, the student's voice is infused in what's going on. And so when we think about the learner profile, one of the key attributes of having a learner profile is being able to articulate that with your instructor so that your instructor can use it to design the instruction and plan for all of the needs in their classroom, all of the styles and methodologies that kids bring to the table. So for them to be able to say, here's how I learn best, help provide that for me, is huge. And to have a teacher that can listen for that, ask for that, and implement that is going to be significant for us. We did have a different process for our middle school kids and our elementary school kids, and I wanted to share that a little bit. For our middle school students, we went around, I came here to the middle school, and I met with a select group of students, and I forget the name that they represented. Oh, darn it. It wasn't the student council. It was the middle school leader group. Anyway, and we more had a open forum conversation. We talked, and they talked, and they talked, and they shared. And I've got some of their comments that I'll share with you in a few minutes. But that was a great opportunity. And then we also did, with our elementary school students, we had each school select a cross-section of 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders. We asked for student leaders. We asked for students who maybe weren't necessarily the traditional student leader, but nonetheless might have an interesting perspective or take on the learning environment. And we did a draw, label, caption activity with them where we gave them a prompt, and then they were to draw a picture that described what they thought about that prompt, and then they had to create a title for it and a caption for it that described their picture, and then we used that caption as the basis for soliciting feedback from them. I have some of their sample artwork here for you, and I'd like to just ask you to peruse this while I'm talking, just because it's good. You should see it. And some of these, some of these are pretty ingenious. Some of the kids had some really interesting things to say, but we compiled all of their feedback, and I wanted to make sure that we shared that with you. Our middle school candidates. As we were talking with them, I was taking notes, and I was trying to put all of their feedback into categories. So I had some of those categories up here. They want someone that's personable, sociable. They want someone who's an explainer. I thought that was a good one. I need someone who's an explainer. Communicative, connective, empathize, trusting, respectful. So you can see some of those big pieces. This was interesting because our middle school students were the one group that made sure they told us what they didn't want, which was interesting. They didn't want teachers that acted the same age as the kids. They didn't want teachers with, and you can see, bad attitudes, getting off task. They didn't want a best friend. They wanted teachers to be the teacher, which was interesting because they also said they wanted a relationship with the teacher. But I think that's an example of a middle school child right there. They didn't want someone with no personality, someone that was not abrasive and didn't work in the learning environment. They didn't want someone that was super strict, constantly on you. But then they said there's a time and place for strictness. So kind of these typical middle school things, but it was great to hear that feedback from them. Here's an example of one of the things that our students did at the elementary level with the draw, label, caption activity. A good teacher is encouraging. They also correct you. When they do it, they leave encouraging comments. Okay. So they're asking to be shown how to do things properly, but they also recognize that they want that done in a supportive, encouraging manner. We went through, and I tried to coalesce all of these thoughts into some generic components, and we separated it out into relationships, instruction, and classroom environment. And so I've got all of the different things that they talked about. I did note where we had multiple things from multiple buildings. I just put that little asterisk after there. So again, these are attributes that you'll see. Instruction, reads, tells good stories, has correct information. I thought an interesting couple kids said that. Takes control, and let's go. They're talking about loose, tight leadership there, loose, tight instruction, and I think that's really insightful. Classroom environment, they keep an eye out. They have healthy classes. They have control of the class. They tell students if they're misbehaving. They give out good discipline. When I asked what that meant, the students said fair. I thought that was pretty cool. You know, and this was a little one that said that. So all of that leads to the Kaneland profile, which you should have a copy of in your packet. I want to run it forward. So this is the Kaneland profile, and we will want to share this in a variety of manners on our website. When we go out to do job fairs, and it describes in further detail those 10 attributes, so that if someone's looking to come and apply here at Kaneland, we can say, well, this is what we're looking for. And I won't go through all of them because we talked about them earlier. But you can see that we just provide a little snapshot of what all these things mean, and these come from those sources that we had, that these attributes came from. So for integrity, model honesty, trustworthiness, sincerity, that comes from Kaneland 2020. Instructional planning and delivery, that comes from the Danielson framework. Infusing learner voice, that comes from the personalized learning work that we're getting from Southeast Wisconsin. So all of that is something that we can share. We'll talk about some additional ways we're going to message this in next steps. So, what are we going to do with this? We're going to publish it. We're going to put it out, hopefully, on social media. I can share this with our local universities, with the university supervisors that work with our student teachers. These are the kinds of things we're looking for. We have one of our staff members here at the middle school who's going to help us put together a short, 3-minute video that we can put on the website, too, that has examples of what goes on in the classroom, some little shots of our students sharing some of these attributes, describing what this is, so that way if I'm looking to seek out Kaneland as a potential employer, I can go there and I can hear a little bit more about the kinds of people we employ. The cabinet and the administrative team are going to be working to take all of this, the feedback, not only those 10 specific attributes, but then also some of the subjective feedback, and put it in to a hiring process. And so what that means is that for each of these attributes, we're going to have a battery of questions that we can ask at the screening level, at the interview level, and at the final second interview level, if that's what's needed, as well as looking at a performance component for our interview process. As of right now, we don't necessarily require a performance component, but if we're going to be hiring people to teach, I kind of want to see that. So we're talking about what methods and what media candidates can provide examples of that in. Is that direct observation, video, et cetera. So we'll have a process that administration's working on so that when we go, we can say we have checked off a variety of different times, a variety of different ways, to a variety of different levels of rigor and depth, that these attributes are present in this candidate. And then we're going to put that process into place, hopefully, and start for the summer hiring season. So that work's yet to be done, but the first step of having an actual descriptor of who we want to hire is complete, and we're excited to get a process aligned to that and start hiring people. So, questions or compliments?
I'll start with the compliments.
Yeah.
Nice job.
Good.
Thank you.
So now the question.
Yes.
So I saw the nice pictures that you had here of the children and stuff, and actually everything put together and such. So how do we bring it home to what we currently have? Is that let me be blunt. How do we push out those that aren't doing what the students are looking for?
Right. I think that's an ongoing conversation about the evaluative process and the feedback process. So first comes the feedback, and how do we coach them up? I've had many conversations with people who, as you give them more quality feedback, more explicit feedback, and more explicit support, it typically comes out that they are unconsciously unaware of either a behavior or an understanding. So you do realize that we don't necessarily do that anymore. Oh, we don't? Well, why not? And then through that process of conversation and instructive feedback, they're able to say, oh, maybe I could do it this way. And then that's where instructional coaches come in. Well, how do I do that? Well, we have these master teachers in every building who are there to help show you. Co-teach, model, observe with, all of those kinds of things. If that process has been exhausted and they're not unconsciously unaware of something, then we start to coach them out. And that's it's a difficult process. It's a process no one necessarily likes to talk about, but it's a necessary one. I think that you have probably seen aspects of that process at play throughout the school year. I think that no one has a vested interest or a common interest in keeping people that aren't typifying these attributes. So, to kind of summarize that, more often than not, it's an issue from my perspective of coaching up through that direct, explicit feedback. But then on those rare occasions, we look to coach people out. Going hand in hand with the coaching up is also the development of the skill of the administrators giving the feedback. And we do that on a regular monthly basis at our ad team meetings. We do learning walks where we go in groups and we observe similar classrooms, and then we come back and we process. What did we see? Was that evidence-based? Was that interpretive? What is the interpretation we take from that evidence? What did you see? What did I see? And we do that integrated reliability piece. And through that process, we're coaching ourselves up to be more consciously aware of all of the aspects of teaching. So there's a lot to it, but it's an ongoing process. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Other compliments or questions?
These kids are good.
They are. You know what? I have to tell you, being a principal and an administrator for 15 years, now coming to the central office, to go back and talk to kids as much as I did for this, it was like a breath of fresh air for me. It was so neat to hear these kids, especially our high school students. I was so energized at the advocacy, the interest, the desire to be active in what was going on in and around them. That was really cool. I left and I'm like, I have kind of like a renewed sense of energy for our country and our community. Like, this is good. We're okay. So anyway, you'll see a revised process for hiring come into play, and it will be infused with this.
So what are some attributes that were excluded that maybe were good attributes? Everything, you look at 10, they look really good.
That's a great question. So there were 21 things overall that people had to prioritize, and the 11 that didn't make it, I think you'll still see embedded in this process, but maybe more as a subset. And so I wouldn't want to go so far as to say anything was excluded, because we are looking at all of it, but these would be the ones that we would focus on and categorize our thinking around. So all those other attributes, professional responsibilities, delivery of instruction, those are the two from the Danielson framework. Some of the other components from the personalized look-fors. The other core values, all 5 of our core values from Kaneland 2020, we had some conversation at CAC about why aren't all these like first and foremost. These are just human nature kinds of things, and they are. They're important. They'll be part of the conversation. But of them, integrity was the one that came to the fore. So.
Okay. Any questions, anyone?
One more. In putting all this together, I heard children, I heard groups and all this other good stuff. Is KA also part of this?
KEA?
Right.
Yeah, they were part of it through TAC and AAOC. Those are their identified committees to provide input for these kinds of things. That's why we went to those 2 committees specifically to get their input. Absolutely.
And obviously the other groups as well.
Yeah. The administration also got a chance to see, after all that work was done and before coming to the board, they helped with some refining and revision and editing as well. And so we feel we have a pretty robust perspective on all of this based on everybody that touches the school district. So.
Chris, I know it's early in the process. So although you've identified like new criteria, do you see or foresee any changes in the hiring process itself?
Absolutely, and that's what I was just describing as a next step. The next step is to take this and restructure how we do our hiring. Right now, more often than not, it's a subset of a committee of administrators that interview a panel of teachers. Different levels do it different ways, and then they make a recommendation. Sometimes that includes staff, sometimes that doesn't. Sometimes that includes a certain perspective in terms of the questions being asked because of the the needs at that grade level or that team, but to kind of coalesce that into a unified process is important. One of the reasons it's very much important is, especially with declining enrollment, a hire at KST this year might be working at KSS next year or KME the following year. And if we're going to hire someone who's a good fit at this building only, I don't know if that's good for our system. We need to make sure that a good hire for our elementary is a good hire for any of our elementaries, that they can walk into any grade, any position, anywhere that they're certified for, and do a good job. And so this expands that thinking a little bit, which is, I think, healthy and good for us. So.
I'll give you a compliment too. It's going well.
Thank you. Other questions? No? Excellent. Please look for this on our website. Please look for the video as we get that together. And then we will be sharing maybe some more insight about a process down the road.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Atkins.
Thanks to everyone that had a hand in it. That's great.
I'm glad we finally put an HR person back in there.
Yes.
Now we're seeing some of the results. So.
That's another compliment.
Yeah.
Yes.
That one was for Todd too, I think.
So that concludes new business for tonight. We'll move on now to item K, which is the superintendent and board report.
Yep, last night we had our foundation pork chop dinner. We've been sharing some information about that. And thanks to Shauna, who attended the foundation meeting last Wednesday and hopefully didn't feel obligated to have to come to the pork chop dinner, but thank you for coming and sharing. We had a number of central office staff or district office staff members, foundation members, Shauna, a couple administrators, take care of the meals last night. Great relationship with the Elburn Lions. They had their 4 or 5 gentlemen outside cooking the pork chops to perfection. If you had one, you would have known that. So it was a good relationship, and I think hopefully that'll be a standing event from year to year. And I think we probably made close to $650. And we were open until
It was $674.50.
Really?
Yep.
Wow, we should have asked you first.
It's okay.
Compliment. So, and what was cool, we went all the way, we went from 4 till 6:30, and we had somebody right at 6:30 come in and say, one of my neighbors said they had some pork chops, do you have any left? So we came right at the end and got a couple, the last couple, and wanted to have them, so it was within walking distance. So thank you for your support on that. CAC for this Thursday is canceled. We had to cancel it due to both Julianne and I serving on the auditor interviews, which I'm sure she'll provide a little more information in a couple minutes. But what we did send an invite out to all the CAC members about the gallery walk, which is next board meeting on the 26th from 6 o'clock to 7 o'clock. We have invited you to that. There'll be another reminder coming out in the weekly update. And we do have, so far, I think 25 different stations represented. So as we come into the Harder Cafeteria at 6 o'clock, we'll do a quick introduction, allow board members, we'll probably have to leave a little sooner than 7 just to come down to get ready, but we do have 25 different presentations set up and information available as part of the gallery walk. And the last thing I had was next Wednesday is the Hall of Fame, Wednesday the 21st, and I know that Gail attends the Hall of Fame, and that's always a fun one. All of the potential inductees have been submitted. We have all of their information. So next Wednesday we get to consider our new inductees for the Hall of Fame class of 2018.
There's what, like 8 or 10 or something like that?
I think
Quite a few.
I think 7 or 8, yeah. I think there's 8. And so that was what I had. Julianne, I don't know if you wanted any more information on the auditor interviews on Thursday night?
Sure. They will take place in the district office from 6 to 9 p.m. We have 8 people on our interview team. Ryan and Aaron will represent the board. I have 3 FAC members. They are the same 3 people that screened the companies or the firms, the paper copies, and then myself, Dr. Layden, and then my assistant, Lynn Menth, who does a lot of the work, the daily work with the auditors. And hopefully in, what is this, February, the next meeting, I'm trying to remember what month it is, I will have a recommendation for a new auditing firm for all of you.
Good.
So thank you.
Does the first firm start right at 6?
Yes, it does.
Should we come a little early or?
Yep, I sent you an email today. If you didn't get it, let me know. But I'd like to have you here at 5:45, please.
Sounds good.
Yep. Door number 8, district office.
Door number 8. Okay.
On the west side.
Okay.
I always pick door number 2.
On the gallery walk,
Huh?
I believe there'd be a calendar entry for that, like an invite, calendar.
Yes, I can
type thing.
send that.
Can you do that?
Yep, as a reminder.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And we also do have, a raffle drawing. We have some foundation golf balls to give away for those that are attending. Gave away some of those last night too with some of the dinners. We do have some other items that we'll be raffling off. And also there'll be a little guide, presentation guide that has all the topics by numbers. And that way you can quickly look around the different presentation stations to see which ones you want to hit first. To try and be efficient with your 45 minutes. Welcome. I will do the calendar invite.
Okay. I guess
Nope. I will
add
send
it to my own.
Nope. I'll send it.
I just thought it would be helpful for more than just myself.
Yep.
Okay, so that's it?
That's all we have, yes.
Board members have anything? Report? Nothing? Okay, topics for future agendas?
I'd like potentially to consider, this week I found out that we have a lot of unwritten rules in every aspect of the school that we, to some degree, almost treat them like policy. And it also complicates things for some of the people that have to enforce some of these. So I guess I'd like to discuss on, at least be in some way, shape, or form, and some of them are, be transparent with, so there won't be any gray areas. So
Are you talking about students or staff?
I'm not understanding at all what you're referencing.
All right, so
Can you
there's-
be a little
there's-
more specific, please?
All right, so there's some from the sports side. There's some from the counselor side. There's like unwritten rules, like as an example, one that's really established from a counselor side. From my understanding is that there's a student can after 5 days in the class, there's a boom, 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 boom. You can get out of that class if it falls into these categories. Well established. But there's also things that are also come up that it's like, oh, what do we do with this one? And then there's unwritten rules that no one knows. Had it was known, then therefore people would know, parents in a sense. And there's also loopholes that when parents start digging up, they say, okay, fine, I got you. So therefore you got to do this. So there's a lot of unwritten rules at the end of the day. And I've heard it from the counselor side as well, where it's like, yeah, it's not, it puts us in a pickle, because they're not established. They're just more, this is what we do. So therefore, they're having a rough time on it as well. Same thing even from a sports side of it. You got, if you quit a team at a certain time, you are on that team until the end of that season. And you can't move on to another sport. Yet the IHA say you can be in 2 sports. So we're even contradicting ourselves. So
I'm having a hard time with what the topic is because you covered so much material under that
there's
one.
a lot of material.
I have no idea what you want to talk about. So
make ourselves transparent for those things,
Which things?
unwritten rules that we have that we're enforcing, yet people don't know about. And yet when it's, oh, yeah, we got an unwritten rule, so therefore it is what it is.
Can I offer to have a conversation, a greater conversation at length to get more the idea of those? Because the athletic one we talked about a couple times this week, but the other ones, that's news to me. That's news that I'm hearing. So if there are these two and additional ones, I would be happy to do the research on those to try to make sure that we are transparent on those. So I don't know if it may or may not be a full board discussion or a topic, but at least if I can have an idea of what they are administratively or with our staff, we can get to the bottom of those.
All right, sure. And I'd like the whole board to know it.
And I'm not trying to keep it from a new agenda. I just want to try to find the first way to try to target those and get to the bottom of some of them.
Okay.
Okay. So we'll start there. And then if there's a policy level discussion, we'll have it afterwards. Because this sounds like procedural. Okay. Are there other topics? Consideration, anyone? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to public comments. This is the second and final opportunity for public comment at this meeting. The same rules apply. Are there any public comments?
I'm Carolyn Kamel, President of the Speak. And just recently, we received notice that there are organizations, one named in particular is Parents Foundation for Education, and they're out fishing for information, specifically members of unions, personal information. I doubt you'd even give that out, but just to let you know that other Mary Lori Stroka already informed you, but just to be aware, they're bogus, fake organizations trying to get personal information to reach out to union members. Like I said, I doubt any of you would, but just to let you all aware. Okay. Our attention.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there. Are there any other public comments? Okay, hearing none, I will close the floor to public comment. We do have an executive session tonight to discuss collective negotiating matters between the public body and its employees or their representatives, or deliberations concerning salary schedules for one or more classes of employees. We'll also be discussing the employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the public body or legal counsel for the public body, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against an employee of the public body or against legal counsel for the public body to determine its validity. And we do anticipate taking action after the closed session. So at this time, we are looking for a motion to go into closed session.
So moved.
Second.
And a roll call, please.
Mr. Rivas.
Aye.
Mrs. Sparber.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt.
Aye.
Mr. Carey.
Aye.
Mr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mr. LePayton.
Aye.
Mrs. Pavlik.
Aye. Motion carries 7-0. And once the executive session has concluded, the recording of the meeting will continue and include the action taken by the Board of Education. So we stand, well, we're going, not adjourned, we're going into executive session. So. 2018-2019 school year.
So moved, or seconded.
And a roll call, please.
Mr. Rivas?
Wait, sorry, point of order.
It'll be a yes, because we're disapproving it.
Yeah.
Okay.
To be yes if
If
you go along with
agree
what you're
to-
saying?
Yeah.
Aye.
So it was, okay,
That's
so
why-
there's a choice here, and so it's, my motion was that we do not approve the one-year leave of
So you
absence.
vote yes if you want to not approve.
To not approve, it's a yes vote.
Okay.
It seems
So if I don't
counterintuitive,
agree with
but
what you
that's-
said, I say yes.
Yes.
Correct.
Mrs.
Do you want her
Barber?
to have it? Do you want her?
Aye.
Okay.
Mrs. Witt?
Aye.
Mr. Carey?
Aye.
Well, I didn't vote.
Mr. Lawler?
Who did that?
Aye.
She called me first.
Mr. LePayton?
Abstain.
What did you put? Pedro didn't
I
feel
said
like.
yes, but that's not what you said, I'm sorry.
Whichever one I'm supposed to say that I don't agree.
All right, so you're a no then?
Yeah.
You disagree with
You
Teresa?
disagree with the motion?
Correct.
Okay,
Okay.
fine.
And Ms. Pavlik, yes.
Okay,
So we've
so the
got 1,
motion
2,
carries
3,
with
4,
5 yeses, 1 abstention, 1 no, and 1 abstention.
Right.
Okay? And now we need a motion to adjourn at 9:55.
So moved.
And I'll second it. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? And we stand adjourned.
Thank you.
10 o'clock.